All right, it has been a while since we've been able to do this, but welcome back to another Judgment Gaming exhibition match. I am Justice. I am joined here by Owen, or Big O. Some of you might know him. How are you doing today?
Oh, great so far.
Good deal, good deal. So, we are going to be looking today at another best of 5 conquest match. It's going to be between our returning champion, Narkotikz, versus a newcomer, Watchr. Now, obviously, a lot of things are different today compared to the last time we got to do a match, since our last match was technically still with Ungoro. We did not allow our participants to use Knights of the Frozen Throne since it had kind of just released, I think, that day. I think we did a day of release, didn't we? Yeah, so some random effects were able to generate Frozen Throne cards, but that was it. So this is our first match, which is fully in the Knights of the Frozen Throne meta. This is, of course, current, so this is post-balance changes where some cards have been changed. And we'll see kind of how that affects things. So let's go ahead and give a quick analysis of what we feel looking at our competitors' lineups. And before we do, I do just want to state for the record for our audience that we are on a 5-minute delay just to preserve the integrity of the game, just to make sure there's no easy ways to cheat. Not that I expect either of our competitors would, but just to keep things all nice and on the level. So I do encourage you guys to interact in chat. Just be aware that anything you say directed at us, we will be replying to on a delay. So with that said, as I said, let's go ahead and get into the lineup. So Narkotikz, to I think no one's surprise who knows him or watched our last series, has decided to bring Hunter. That is his favorite class, the one that he hits Legend with every month. So that should come as no surprise at all that he has that in his lineup. I think this is a good time for him because this is the first time in a while, really, that Hunter's actually become a quote-unquote legitimate tournament choice again. So I think that really favors him, don't you?
Yeah, most certainly. It's definitely a good time to be a hunter. I know that the irony here is that the list hasn't actually changed very much since the release of Frozen Thrones, but the texture of the metagame has certainly changed, and that's definitely been a boon to a hunter because it allows it to prey on priest decks, which typically have a hard time defending against it.
Right. Now, with that said, of course, Watchr has not brought priest, but Narkotikz has. I'll be interested to see if it is the more favored Razakis priest, or if he'll be bringing big priest. We'll see which he likes to go with there. And of course he has paladin, which one would expect would be Murloc paladin, in that it's the only, I would say, meta paladin deck right now, but he could of course be going with something a little bit more offbeat, such as control paladin or even hand buff paladin. So it'll be good to see what he has there. Do you have any insight into what that might be, or are we going in blind with that one?
I suspect it's going to be a Murloc Paladin deck. That's a style of deck that he's familiar with, so I expect him to go with what he's more familiar with, even though I do believe he may have been entertaining hand buff, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be Murloc.
Okay, neat. And of course his Shaman has been banned away. I would expect that was probably Evolved Shaman, as it's really Shaman's only considered strong deck right now, but it is actually in a very good spot right now, so Watchr wanted none of that. But over on his side, we'll start with the ban on this time. So the priest has been banned. Narkotikz knows that he might have a deck that's favored against it. Probably not interested in the mirror match, because if it, say, is both Razakis priest, kind of whoever draws Raz or Anduin first gets to win, and just kind of wanted to avoid that, I suppose. The interesting part is that Watchr is also bringing Hunter. Now, I imagine this is more due to Hunter's current strength rather than on the other side with Narkotikz, where he just always plays Hunter no matter what. So I think it's safe to say one of these players probably has more experience with the class than the other.
Yeah, most certainly. I think it'd be probably pretty safe to say that Narkotikz is far more experienced with the hunter class, and so I would expect his play to be a lot tighter for that particular class.
Right. All right, and we do have a little bit of insight into Watchr's lineup. I know that you got a sneak peek at his deck list, so why don't you run us down the other 2 decks that he has real quick?
Okay, so we saw that he was bringing Warlock, which he had notated here as a handlock deck, so that should be a slowing controlling class, which I suspect he may have some difficulty handling some of the more aggressive lineups that that Narcotikz has brought to the table. Since while Warlock has received more tools in Knights, I still think that it still kind of struggles against those more aggressive decks. And the other class that Watchr has brought is what he has self-identified as a burn mage deck. So whether or not that's a techie self-brew with like Hemet and Pyroblast, or if it's more of a tempo style, you and I are both going to have to wait to see.
I am personally rooting for that. If it is Hemet and Pyroblast and whatnot, that would be fantastic. If nothing else, for entertainment value for the stream, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so that's it. So looking at these two players, looking at their lineups, do you want to get bold and make a quick pre-game prediction?
Okay, so so just to recap then, of the three decks that Narcotikz will be using are going to be Hunter, Paladin, and what was the third one?
Priest.
Priest. Okay, pretty strong lineup, I would say. Rizaka's Priest is really powerful, and I'd say the two aggressive decks can definitely punish the slower or less consistent decks that Watchr can bring. Watchr is going to be lining up with a burning mage deck, a control warlock, a handlock, if you will, and the third one was going to be
his Hunter.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give the nod to Narcotikz. I think we're going to see our first title defense today.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree with you. And for those paying attention, as I just kind of pointed out, we have yet to have a successful title defense. But I think today might be the day that streak is broken. I do like his lineup a little bit more. I will say this: one thing that I find personally interesting through both these players is, in addition to what they brought, is kind of what they didn't bring. We see no Druid. Because even after the balance changes, Jade Druid is still in a very good spot, particularly in a tournament lineup, either to just draw that ban or to target some of the more controlling decks that tend to be brought in a tournament-style lineup. So it's interesting that neither of them brought that. And then there's also the absence of Rogue, which I find a little bit more forgivable in that the rise of Tempo Rogue is a pretty recent development. So if these players are either not completely staying on top of that meta or just haven't had the time to put in with the deck to the point where they feel comfortable bringing it, I can certainly understand that. But it just is interesting to note that two of the stronger decks in the metagame right now were not brought by either player.
Certainly interesting. It could be definitely a combination of the two, but I guess we'll have to wait and see whether or not their choices were adequate for the match, at least. So
right.
I'm suspecting Narc may get the nod here, but I am certainly hoping that Watchr provides an upset.
Right. Yeah. So we'll absolutely see. So I'm gonna let our players know that they can get started here. I'm gonna have to go to each of my things here. Actually, you know what? If I could just message on this one, I'd make my life a whole lot easier. Okay. Alright, so I have let our players know that it is time to begin the fun. So as they get prepared, which it looks like they should be just about finished with. Let's see, do you have any thoughts on what classes you expect to see to open up the series?
That's a really good question. I could definitely see Narc going in with Paladin, just to kind of test the waters. It's a pretty safe choice. Not his best deck, not his worst. Or he could be trying to start strong with Priest. As far as Watchr is concerned, again, tough choice. I could definitely see him entering in with Priest, just because it's a pretty safe matchup versus Narcotikz lineup, as it should have a more or less favored match, and perhaps saving his spicier deck lists for later on the set.
Right. Okay. So you think that Narcotikz will hold on to his Hunter for maybe almost the clinching game or something a little later on?
I think so.
I think he brought it out earlier than we expected last time, didn't he? Because he didn't bring it first game. Didn't he brought it out in like the second game or something? I'm trying to recall.
Off the top of my head, I don't exactly recall which deck he started with. I believe he started with Shaman last time. And then went with Hunter for round 2. So we'll see if he makes it a pattern, certainly.
Right. Yeah, no, it'd definitely be interesting to see what happens there. It's always fun to see if someone leaves a deck for like that ace. For okay, I need to win this one last match, so I'm going to save the deck that I know I can win with, or if they decide to go a different route. All right, so players are just texting. Let me know. So they should be hopefully ready to start. So we are just going to wait on them. Sorry, I'm checking my phone is bad form, but they're texting about it. Okay, so I think we're good.
Yeah, should be.
All right, so let's see. I will say personally, I kind of want to see the Hunter mirror match. I think it'll be funny. It'll be fun, just for the player that's been playing it all this time, versus the guy who is bringing it, because it's meta. That's not to say that it's completely blind. I'm sure Watchr has spent time, with the deck. I'm sure he's not bringing a deck that he's just never played before. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes. I think it'll be fun. So it looks like they are getting into games, so we will switch over here. And
Perfect.
We should be ready to start. So it will be Narkotikz Hunter, so he will lead with it versus Watchr's Mage. And we do see it is a quest mage from Watchr.
Interesting.
So I do apologize for viewers at home. I don't have a way of showing the mulligan, but we do see the quest plus other cards. So it is indeed a quest mage from Watchr. So
Interesting.
I don't know what he was going on about Burn Mage, but
I mean, he's technically not wrong. The strategy is, of course, to
I
break
mean,
down.
yeah, in the end, he is doing things. Although he said something about giants, right? So is it possible that rather than the Exodia version, that he went with the Alex Straza Giants version?
I suppose it's not impossible. I do know that that Watcher's put in some time with this deck, so he is familiar with how to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And already I can see there is some difference from the version of the deck that I play versus versions of the deck that obviously he's going with. So we do see him pick up a freezing potion here, presumably to try and save some life points for him.
Right.
And maybe on a future turn.
And I guess there goes my theory, because there is a Molten Reflection in his hand, which is usually reserved for the Exodia version that needs to copy Sorcerer's Apprentices. So yeah, so this is interesting for sure. Now obviously there is the risk of the Hunter just very quickly taking down that life total before Watchr has a chance to assemble the pieces of the combo. So that is a very real risk. So I think Narkotikz is deciding right now exactly how he wants to do this. I think this is the right decision. Just play hard onto the board. Just try to create as much consistent damage as possible. Because that's usually the best way to try to beat quest mages. You just want to get through their life total before they have a chance to set up. So we do see Watchr having to play extremely reactively here. With the Frostbolt on one Glocka Crawler and just freezing the other to prevent an attack. Patch is not the draw you want to see. But Narkotikz still left with a very strong turn 4 play with the Houndmaster.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is too is that, like, from my experience with this deck, I do feel that Watchr is definitely the underdog in this match. I feel that Hunter has a pretty easy time pressuring this kind of mage deck to the point where they really should not be. They really have a hard time kind of playing reactively. In fact, I would argue that keeping the quest in this particular matchup was a mistake, as the way that you're likely winning this game is not going to be through time warping with a bunch of Sorcerer's Apprentice, but largely just surviving and out-tempoing them. So
Right.
It does appear that that mistake may come back to bite him in this particular matchup.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is not looking like a great win condition for him at the moment, and we see on turn 5 he's already down to 11 life. There are 2 ice blocks in hand, so he can at least buy himself a couple turns, but when you're already this low, and all you can do is get rid of 1 minion, we do see a little bit of the emotes coming out from Narkotikz there.
Yeah, definitely a sense of humor. And to be honest, looking at his hand, this is not going to be enough to put up an adequate defense. Without something drastic like a Blizzard next turn, I don't see him surviving for another rotation or two.
Right, and I will say the Arcanologist in his hand, if he's running a standard list, it's actually probably a dead card, in that most lists will run 1 Ice Barrier, 2 Ice Blocks, and all 3 of those cards have already been drawn.
Yeah, definitely not looking like he's going to likely get a draw out of it unless he's playing a Mana Bind as a tech card. But in this particular case, the 2/3 body is probably the most relevant part about it, as neither of the other secrets that he could possibly get would really be that impactful right now, especially from a tempo perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have the Famous Hunter play, a turn 6 high main. I mean,
yeah, and at this point, I don't even know what Battling could even produce at this point.
Nothing particularly useful. I will say that.
Yeah,
he's probably just going to go ahead and freeze the high main. Yeah. So freeze the high main just to block some damage. It does not really. I think he's considering, a ping plus trade on the Houndmaster, which he'll go it this way instead. So he removes 2 damage off of the board instead of 4, but keeps his minion. I don't know if that's really all that impactful.
Well, it could be relevant in that he did remove 2 minions with 1 attack, so it would make it more difficult for him to drop him to 1. But as a hunter, really the key damage point is going to be 2 life, not 1.
Right.
So I don't know if it's going to really make a huge difference here.
Yeah, I don't think it did. There's really, I can't see any way for Watchr to come back in this game at this point. There's no way for him to finish his quest on time. He can put down the ice block, but it just saves him for a turn, and on the next turn there's really nothing he can do that's going to
and seeing that he
really
has
change
high
his
tempo
fate.
tools in his deck, like Medivh's Valet, it leads me to believe that there's maybe some more tempo elements in his list than the typical, turbo quest variant where it runs like, novice engineers and such to turbo through the deck.
Right.
So if that's the case, I definitely feel that was a huge mistake to keep that quest, as any sort of game against a hunter is going to end well before you can turn that thing online.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you. It may just be a little bit of inexperience on Watchr's part in dealing with that kind of matchup, but clearly there's no way out of this.
Yeah, at this point, it's definitely going to be a case closed. So that means that Narkotikz here is going to rack up a quick game 1.
Extremely quick, yeah. I mean, we're on turn 9, so you want to say quick. It's just going to go for a little bit more of the plays here. But it obviously felt extremely quick in that he developed his board and was, from turn 1 on, basically looked like the favorite to win the game there. So yeah, so that was a very easy, I would say, victory for Narkotikz in that one.
Most certainly.
So yeah, that'll be his hunter getting the win. So I'm just gonna go ahead and update our graphic here. I do apologize because it will temporarily flash red. So hunter win down. I think that was the deck that we certainly expected. If nothing else, that Narkotikz is going to find a win there. So that really should come as no surprise. The Hunter Specialist got a win with his Hunter at some point in this series. No way. So that was...
I will say the sole disappointment here is that we're never going to see our Hunter Ditto.
Right.
So,
yes, and that is what I am sad about. I would have, as I said, I would have loved to have seen that Hunter Mirror match. Alas, it was not to be. But such is life sometimes. So there's not really a whole lot to evaluate about that game, I don't think. We had Hunter Specialist doing Hunter things with his Hunter deck against a Quest Mage that is not at all equipped to deal with a Hunter deck.
Yeah, I mean, his deck definitely doesn't look like it was like a super hyper-focused Quest Mage deck. There definitely seemed to be some hybrid elements. I think if I were sitting in Watchr's shoes, I definitely would have mulliganed that quest to try and get some more reactive, tempo-oriented elements and try and just out-tempo him out of the game.
Right.
That's really going to be your best bet in winning those aggressive matchups, and I think that maybe it just might have been, like you said, inexperience with the Hunter matchup.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Alright, so Narkotikz has his Hunter win out of the way, so he's got 2 more decks to win with. So now we'll have to see if Watchr wants to queue up with that Quest Mage again, or if he feels like going with something else. So let our players know. We are ready for game 2. So do you have a prediction on that? If he'll want to just say, okay, you know what, that was a bad match, I still like this deck to lead with, I want to play it again, or if he wants to go with something else here?
Oh man, that's a tough call. I think if I'm sitting in Watchr's shoes, I think I save the mage deck until I know for sure I'm running it against something that's a little bit slower.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing, right? Is that we feel like probably there's one good matchup and one a bad matchup, right? Because he against Rizakis, you know, there you're a little more comfortable playing the quest mage because you feel like you might have enough time to set up to win. Whereas if it is Murloc Paladin, you kind of run the same risk you do with Hunter, just getting beat down too quickly if they get a good early draw. So I feel like he wants that matchup specifically of the quest mage versus the Rizakis priest. I think that'll probably be his best place to get that win. So I don't know. I guess, you know, at this point it's kind of the you know, those mind games of, okay, what do I think, you know, my opponent is going to queue up next, and how do I want to respond to that?
Looks like a mismatch though, because I do gotta remind.
Yes, we will have to remind Narkotikz that his shaman has been banned. It looks like he's made a little mistake there.
Just a minor clerical error, so we'll just go ahead and have to call it a mismatch. And,
yes, yeah. Well, I just let him know, so they should be able to fix that pretty quickly. So we'll just wait for them to... Yep, okay. So they're just getting out of that game now. They'll go ahead and remake. So they'll fix that up.
They'll just remake the match. So, minor miscommunication there, I guess, as to what deck was banned. So we'll just go ahead and get that corrected for the players.
Just letting them know the technicalities of this.
So I think normal tournament etiquette would be to just call that a loss. Is that right?
Perhaps. I'm not going to rob our viewers like that because we only have the one game yet. But yes, I think normally, most likely, yes.
Okay, and we do see the quest mage making a return.
Yes.
Bring it up against priest. So I will say that this was definitely the matchup that he was looking for.
Right. So let me get our... Alright, there we go. Yeah, and Watchr is going to go first and just, of course, play that quest down. Now, his hand is not great in that you don't want your combo pieces early, and he does have 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices in the hand, which is really not what you're looking for.
No, certainly not. Again, I'm not really sure about the mulligan decision here. You do want to get your quest off early against Rizakis because it is known that once they get their engine rolling, it's a very difficult deck to beat, especially as the combo deck. But that being the case, you definitely want to, you know, not have too many combo pieces early because you really need to spend those early turns fishing for draw.
Right.
So, kind of an interesting choice to keep both the apprentices early. We'll see if that comes back to bite him with a hand that maybe doesn't do very much.
Right. All right. So not a bad pickup off of the glyph.
Although playing it now is maybe not the best, given that he does have a coin to throw into it.
Yes, I feel that was immediately a mistake. Yeah, Narkotikz just go ahead and play the Thalnos just to try to cycle it for a card.
Yeah, and I'm expecting to have that hero powered off and then dropping an Arcanologist here to pick up the secrets when he draws them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So both ice blocks in hand. So we see 2 combo pieces plus 2 ways of not dying, and then a Blizzard for some stall. With this, Narkotik's hand, other than the Shadow Reaper Anduin, is not the best. We see the Greater Healing Potion, which is a pretty dead card in this matchup. He has Mind Blast and Holy Smite, which he'd prefer to use with Prophet Valen, although Holy Smite can often be used just as removal, so that's not a big deal. And interestingly, Narkotikz does not play around Counterspell, and just goes ahead and drops the Shadow Word Pain.
I mean, realistically, it's likely because Pain is such a poor card in the matchup anyways. This is only, realistically, one of, like, 2 targets in the deck that's of any real value. And, you know, whether or not he kills it is kind of irrelevant, as the incidental damage it'll deal to his face is going to be, well, incidental and largely irrelevant.
Right. So
much better to get the card out of his hand now, whereas the coin may be relevant later if he intends to use it in combination with either Lyra or Velen later on.
And there is Velen picked up, so both players actually drawing kind of some more combo-oriented cards and not the card draw that they're both looking for early on, although Watchr did get that Novice Engineer off last turn. So neither player with the strongest start, but...
And we have Watchr, who is getting tantalizingly close to the requisite cards that he needs.
Yeah.
One issue that he may have, though, is depending on his build, he may have some issue with actually emptying his hand. Since one of the issues is that, once you have so many cards in your hand, what with all these combo pieces, he does not have a lot of space to, play a lot of draw 2 effects without burning cards. So, as of right now, he only has 2 cards in his hand that he would even be willing to throw away, and both of those are kind of higher value freeze effects that you want to save in case the opponent floods out the board.
Right.
Now, not that Priest is particularly known for that, but these are definitely cards that, he does definitely need to be conscientious of his hand size, especially if he picks up a card like Cold Light Oracle.
Well, interestingly, and the same kind of holds true on the other side, in that if he does Cold Light Oracle, he could end up burning a card or 2 off of Narkotikz, which is not always relevant depending on what's burned, and we do see Shadow Reaper, Anduin, and Prophet Velen already in hand, so there's Raza. So that was the only other thing that was super relevant to burn, other than maybe Kazakus. So Raza is in play going into turn 8 for Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Yeah, and this is definitely a really bad spot, and we see some BM emoting here for Narkotikz. Now, but definitely from his perspective, it's hard to feel like you don't already have the game locked up. You have a fistful of cards, you have Shadow Reaper Anduin coming down, and next turn he's going to be able to drop that Prophet Velen and lay down tons of damage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely in a good spot. Anduin will destroy his own Raza, but that's of little consequence.
Especially at this stage of the game. And we'll expect to see the hero power pick off the 2-2. Nope,
yeah, we'll see how aggressive he wants to get.
Right.
No, just wants to go
makes sense from his perspective.
Yeah.
Since, again, the 2-2 is of little consequence.
Right, and...
so at this point, it's going to be Watchr just trying to turbo through those last few spells that he needs in order to turn his quest online. But just taking a quick glance here, he's only 2 spells in. And,
right.
That's not where you want to be at this stage of the game.
It's not, and his hand is full of combo pieces. He's actually only 1 combo piece off, but with his quest only at 2, a pickup like a Kabbalist's Tome, it might be actually a little bit hard to get off. If he gets it with, say, the other Molten Reflection, we might have to see one of those more kind of speculative plays where it's, getting your apprentices down with the Molten Reflections and then playing Kabbalist's Tome and hoping to get enough off of it that you can play with a huge discount. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one goes, for sure.
Although at this stage, it does look like actually he's going to have a pretty close to lethal, if not. No, this actually is lethal. So Watchr is going to be pressed to actually put down another ice block next turn,
right,
which is going to put a huge crimp on his mana for developing his quest.
Yeah, there's a lot happening here. We just saw Watchr.
30 to 0.
Yeah, I mean, just take a huge amount of damage. So Narkotikz will just go ahead and burn down the 2/6. He could even do more than that if he wanted. I don't know that it's really necessary. So yeah, he'll just go ahead and pass, knowing that he has plenty of damage in his hand. Glyph could be a good pickup, depending on what he gets there. Looks like Polymorph is the play. No, Polymorph is definitely a pretty decent card to get. Of course, he does still only have 4 life, and there is still a Shadow Reaper Anduin with a free hero power. So it's basically he needs to pull it off next turn, or else that's going to be it. That's really all it comes down to at this point. Ice Barrier does nothing to save him. This was the second ice block. So either he Primordial Glyphs another ice block, or Babbling Books another ice block, or he just gets it next turn, and I think that's really it.
Well, he definitely can't just get it next turn.
Did,
so at best...
Okay. I was just wondering if I think Narkotikz almost psyched himself out there and thought that he couldn't pop the block for a moment. I'm sorry, you were saying?
No, I was going to say, as far as outs are concerned, I think I don't really see any.
That'll do it.
Yep, that's going to be it. So that's going to be a pretty decisive 2-0 for Narkotikz here, and we're going to see Watchr again failing to complete with his quest. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he's going to be able to pull off any sort of win in this series at this rate.
Yeah, if I were Watchr, I think I would get away from the quest mage for the next game. You understand you have to win with it at some point, but I think I would just want to get away from it for the moment. Try to kind of reset myself mentally and say, okay, you know what, this hasn't gone well so far. So let's just try to get in a different deck, different mindset. Just say, okay, that didn't work out as I had hoped. I'm not out of this yet, though. So let me just try to do something a little different. He clearly knows how to beat my quest mage. He's done it twice now. Even in the matchup that I kind of wanted, I still lost. I know I'm not super favored against a Murloc Paladin. Let me play something else. Now there's no guesswork involved. You know your opponent's going to be playing Paladin. There is no doubt about that. So, I think you just say, all right, what do I want to play against Paladin? It's probably not Quest Mage. What do I feel is the best opportunity beating Paladin? Let me at least not get swept, 3-0, and then take it from there, and then see what you can do to try to win, reverse sweep the series after that. But I'd definitely get away from the Quest Mage if I were Watchr.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I actually just got a comment from one of the players. It's just, let's just say it's not mage this time. So it looks like Watchr may also be rethinking his decision to take mage into the series, and we'll see if he's going to try his luck with one of his other more decisive decks.
Mm-hmm.
So going into the series, what do you think is going to be his choice? If it's not mage, then what?
It's tough, right? I actually don't think his decks, any of them, line up amazingly well against a Murloc Paladin. I think the mage is obviously not what he wants to go with. A decent draw from the Warlock can, if he can kind of fend off the early aggression, then he certainly has a chance in the late game. I think Hunter maybe is maybe the way you want to go, because as a Hunter, if you can get that board early, get his Murlocs off, and then you can just kind of snowball with your Houndmasters, with your Vanaheimines, with your weapons to control the board, and just try to do that. Now, that is a matchup that can go either way. I'm not saying that I think it's necessarily Hunter favored by a large margin, but I think for Watchr, just going with that deck that maybe is a little bit more on even ground, and I don't know if I want to say simpler to play, but that isn't relying on such a long string of combos and stalling and that kind of thing, and just is playing a more slightly straightforward game plan of get the board early, control the board, win the game, might be good for him to just have that focus.
Certainly. And one thing to definitely keep in mind is that Watchr doesn't necessarily know what kind of deck Narkotikz brought to the table. So while he may have a suspicion that it's Murloc, he doesn't know for certain.
Right.
So it'll certainly be interesting to see whether or not Narkotikz does in fact bring the Murloc Paladin as they suspected, or if he's going to try bring a different deck. Something a little bit more speculative. Now, if for whatever reason we do find that it's not the Murloc deck and that it's something different, like a controller, Handbuff Paladin,
Beardo OTK?
do you think that helps? Yeah, Beardo OTK,
I'm just saying.
Even Handbuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that improves Watchr's chances?
I think, let's say Handbuff, for example, I think the answer is yes and no, because I think it just becomes more draw dependent at that point. So I think you can go actually further in either direction, and that with a good draw, it actually makes it harder for Watchr. But given that that deck does have some bad draws in it, that a poor draw on Narkotikz side actually gives Watchr a better chance. Whereas Murloc Paladin, usually, even if they don't curve out perfectly, like, Tidecaller, Rockpool Hunter, War Leader, Megasaur, even if they don't get that perfect curve, usually have some decent early game plays, whereas a Handbuff Paladin with a bad draw can actually struggle in the early game. So it will make it a little bit more polarizing, in that it'll go either better or worse to more of an extreme, being a little bit more draw dependent. So I think if you're Watchr, you almost hope for that, because you just want whatever it is that's going to help you get back into this series. You want to pick up one win, I think, is really the main thing. You're down 2-0, but the series isn't over. If you pick up that first win, you say, okay, I am capable of winning here. We still have some games to play, but now I don't have to win 3 in a row. Now I have to win 2 in a row. And 2 in a row is really not nearly as intimidating. It's really not that big a deal. So I think that's really the biggest thing. You just do whatever you feel gives you the best chance to win this one game, since obviously if you lose, it's over anyway. But it's also just good for the mindset. It's just, I think it's a very different feel to be down 2-0 or to be down 2-1. And you just feel like you have a much better chance. And we have seen, reverse sweeps are obviously very possible. So if Narkotiks' Paladin is maybe something a little bit different, say it's a Beardo OTK, for example, I'm just throwing that out there, it probably isn't, but let's say it is. And let's say he has some draw problems, and isn't able to get to his combo consistently, then maybe that is the type of deck that Watchr can sweep with his lineup. So I don't think all hope is lost, so I think we'll just be, we'll have to see what happens, moving forward. But yeah, I said for Watchr, I think maybe you go with Hunter, try to play a slightly more straightforward game plan so you can keep yourself focused, and try to pick up that first win.
Certainly. All right. Well, without further ado, let's not keep the players waiting any longer, and let's give them the okay to move forward.
Alright, so messages has been sent off. And it looks like they are about ready to get into game here. As Watchr had enough time to kind of think about the things that we were thinking about and figure out which deck he feels is going to give him the best chance here. So we'll go ahead and get started. And he did choose Warlock. So the only wrong choice I felt was Mage. So we'll say that. And we do see that it is going to be the Murloc Paladin on the side of Narkotiks, as we expected. And he actually has a pretty reasonable draw. He just goes ahead and full keeps, which I don't blame him for. And wow,
yeah,
this is pretty good. He has a lot of options, actually, for how he wants to start this one off.
Most certainly. And I will say that I do actually like Watchr's hand a lot as well, as it has a lot of the reactive tools that, as a handlock deck, that you want to see in your opening draw to help handle the early aggression.
Mm-hmm. I think the Inquisitor was fine. I might have personally gone for the Grimscale Chum specifically for this reason, because of Voidwalker being such a common turn 1 play that the Grimscale Oracle plus Chum allows you to trade through it. But I think he's not really super concerned about that. Figures he has a couple minions that both have more than 1 health, so Voidwalker doesn't get a free trade. So I think he's perfectly happy to just sit there, bump it, and know that he still has the better board state right now.
Most certainly. And we do see the life tap here. Kind of a gutsy play, given that he only has so many turns to clear out these Murlocs before Megasaur could come down.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about not utilizing that drain life when you had the chance?
I think it was a mistake. I understand why he did it and that he's trying to get his Mountain Giant online as quickly as possible, but against a Murloc Paladin deck that's already flooding the board, I don't think that's your win condition. A single 8/8 when you're already getting beaten down by 4 or 5 minions is not the difference maker. But we do see the Drain Soul and Mortal Coil to take actually a lot of power off of Narkotiks' board. Small Time Recruits is an interesting inclusion that doesn't make it into a lot of Murloc Paladin decks. That's interesting.
No, but with the 1/1 Oracle, I could definitely see how it might, give the deck a little bit more staying power, as it gives the Paladin deck the ability to kind of chew through the board, or chew through its deck faster than it might otherwise.
Yeah.
I could definitely see a coin Dreadlord here, since I do think that the Hellfire is kind of lackluster at this point in time.
Oh, Hellfire's terrible.
I could also
to start out.
Yeah, I mean, needless to say. But the thing is that the Dreadlord doesn't actually look all that great either, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, it is possible that you're trying to save the coin for a Siphon Soul.
You see a tap.
Now, picking up the Drain Soul is not the worst in the world, but it's like, at this point...
It's just popping a Divine Shield, really, and it's dealing 0... If he does have Divine Shield, it deals 0 damage and heals for 0. So he's considering a Drain Soul on the Megasaur, but what's the follow-up after that? That's...
I mean, it's got to be just dropping down the Hellfire then, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah, but all you're doing is clearing 2 Divine Shields in the Megasaur, which isn't great. And we do see the Rallying Blade actually buffing up those Divine Shield minions. That was unfortunate. This is a very good position for Narkotiks.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm not really sure what is going to climb Watchr back into this game. As even picking up this, the Mistress of Mixtures is not really going to be enough.
No, and we And we know that there's a noble sacrifice down as well, so even if there was some way, some universe in which Watchr is able to get a good minion trade, he still can't.
Right, and I think that honestly his best move may have been just to coin out the Dreadlord last turn to clear away the Divine Shields and get a little bit of incidental damage on the Megasword.
Because if nothing else, it might have been able to trade.
Mana.
Yeah.
Right, and that means that this turn he would have had the opportunity. More than likely, there's a good chance that Narkotikz could have traded into the Dreadlord or ignored it. In either case, he would have been able to Hellfire and still been at probably a reasonable enough life total that he wouldn't be dead on board here.
Right.
Whereas in this particular instance, I think after this War Leader comes down, he's going to be at too low of a life total to make any sort of move he can make of consequence.
Right, and that's the point, is that a lot of Warlock's AoE is symmetrical, that it hits both players. So obviously that's just the game. War Leader may have been nerfed, but turns out it's still a good card when you're just super ahead on board with Murlocs.
Yeah, and definitely shows that the most relevant part of the card remains intact. So
yes, that attack buff still definitely relevant, for sure.
Wow, so that was a pretty rapid set, I have to say, and it looks like Narkotikz does keep his title.
Yeah, he'll be the first person to actually be able to do that, in quite convincing fashion. Yeah.
First today, actually. This is the first time we've had a set not go to the full 7 games.
Right.
And it's the first time that we've had a player completely sweep the other. So definitely a really convincing win for Narkotikz. Still good showing for Watchr. I do hope to see him back again, hopefully with a little bit more of a experience under his belt. Hopefully he's learned some valuable lessons, and I do expect to see him again, as this is not going to be the last time. Certainly.
Yeah, no, I think for sure that depending on what kind of player he is, I feel like after a set like that, you might want an opportunity at revenge or some sort of redemption at some point. So, but yeah, that was definitely not even close to, or rather, it's not a stretch to say that was the most dominating set that we've had so far in our exhibition matches. Narkotikz won all 3 games quite convincingly. In all 3 games, he appeared to be ahead pretty much right from the beginning. The only possible exception being the Priest game, but that's because Rizaka Priest isn't trying to do a whole lot in the first few turns. But there was no game where he really felt threatened. I would like to point out to our viewers that while it had an extremely poor showing here, Quest Mage is not a terrible tournament deck. I don't think it was just a horrible mistake to include it in the lineup if it is a deck that Watchr has played a lot of and feels comfortable with. I think that he may not have wanted to queue it back up after that first game, maybe wanted to save it a little bit, just because of how badly that first game went. It was just personal opinion. I said and you guys have probably noticed this from the last few ones we've done. I like to think about the mental aspect of it a lot, and trying to avoid personal tilt. And I think that's sometimes a good way to do it, especially for a player if they don't have a lot of tournament experience. For a seasoned veteran, it's not going to be as much of a factor. But for a player without a ton of tournament experience, I think that thinking about those things is definitely relevant. And just trying to reset your mindset and keep yourself positive. I don't know if that was an issue for Watchr or not. I do know personally that it's something that I would at least give some consideration to. But again, I don't think Quest Mage was necessarily wrong to bring. But again, I do want to highlight what we talked about in the pregame, which was the no Druid, no Rogue, and in decks that are a little bit different. And again, we do want to highlight, I think, too, that even in his Warlock choice, which is Warlock is certainly not in as bad a spot as it was in the Ungoro meta, but it's still certainly not a top tier deck. But even within that, he went with the Handlock version, which is not what we see as often when players do want to bring it to a competitive event. We usually see more of a just demon kind of control variant that aims to play some demons, get a good Blood Reaver Gul'dan, and kind of go from there. The Handlock is a little bit more prone to some dead draws, such as like Faceless Shambler and that kind of thing. So his decks, I want to say, and we didn't see his Hunter, so I'm not sure what's going on there, although usually the Hunter lists don't vary too much. But I want to say his decks were maybe somewhat ambitious, given that they required a lot of things to go right, and we saw that when a wrench got thrown into those plans, how quickly it kind of all crumbled.
Certainly, and the thing is that Narkotikz is definitely the kind of player who favors aggressive strategies, and those are the exact kind of strategies that really punish slower controlling strategies or decks that have a lot of moving parts. So perhaps this was just a matter of the player's personal playstyles kind of naturally countering one another, whereas Watchr perhaps favors the more, don't want to say clunky, but maybe the little bit more extravagant controlling and comboing strategies, whereas Narkotikz definitely gravitates toward the more aggressive ones.
Right, and I think that is a fair point, and that it might just be personal playstyle preferences that just happen to not match up well for Watchr here. So, I guess, kind of in your opinion, do you feel that after this he might question himself a bit on his lineup choices and think about some other options? Because something like, say Jade Druid as an example, if he had brought that, say, against maybe a Hunter or even the Paladin, and say get a little bit more early game control, utilize Spreading Plague a lot to fend him off. I'm not saying that that suddenly makes him favored, but I'm saying that it's, again, something that doesn't require as much setup while still having a clear win condition and a slightly more straightforward path to victory. As I said, I've highlighted Rogue. I don't know if that's the kind of deck that's in Watchr's wheelhouse or not, but maybe just some of those types of decks that are capable of fighting for board a little bit earlier. Obviously, he did not know necessarily that Narkotikz has a penchant for aggressive decks, so we're not going to hold that against Watchr. But do you think that kind of going all in on that kind of lineup that just says I lose to aggressive decks, with the possible exception of Hunter, but even there, Hunter, if they lose the board early, are generally in a really bad spot. So he kind of has a whole lineup that just says if my opponent has a good early game, I'm in a lot of trouble. Do you feel like maybe that's something he could look back on, or maybe look forward to for next time and think about, maybe perhaps some different lineup choices?
I think going all in is definitely a risky idea. Now, it is known that a lot of players do gravitate toward slower and controlling strategies, so I think kind of gravitating your lineup towards those kind of decks is not necessarily a mistake. Again, there's no way that he could know that Narkotikz is the kind of player who gravitates toward aggressive strategies, so assuming that he's expecting a normal tournament lineup, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to expect him to bring, Druid decks of his own. So it is a possibility that in selecting his lineup, he was expecting slightly more uniform and slower matches than what he actually ended up with. So that being the case, I think if I were in Watchr's shoes and going through my lineup again, assuming that there was some introspection on the actual play choices, I would definitely consider dropping Warlock from it, at least in the handlock iteration, and perhaps replacing it with a deck that better covers your bases, like Jade Druid. As definitely Jade Druid is the kind of deck that's going to give you the consistency that's going to pressure your opponent into banning it out. I wouldn't be surprised that if he had brought Jade Druid to the lineup, that almost assuredly that would have been the deck banned out, not Priest. Right. Which would have meant that he would have been able to enter the set with a Priest deck, with a Razakus Priest, which definitely could allow him to get a win in there and give him another foothold in that match.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, given the lineups are broad, I will give Watchr credit that I think Shaman was the correct ban. It's the most obvious, I think, aggressive strategy of flooding, the board early. So I will give him credit that I think he made the correct choice in which deck to ban, given his lineup. But yeah, I do think that he definitely opened himself up to a lineup like Narkotikz, which I think is a little bit more balanced than Watchr's was, and I think it's just a calculated risk that just didn't quite work out for him this time.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, gents, I think we are going to go ahead and bring it to a close. I do want to thank everyone for tuning in this time for our exhibition match. Congratulations to Narkotikz for his win, and a huge thank you to both of the players. Yes. We will have this match going up on YouTube, as well as on the main website, jdggaming.com. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, judgmentgaming.com.
No, you were right the first time.
JDGgaming.com.
It's down there. You can see it. Hold on. There it is. Yeah, over there. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Yep, that one. Maybe we'll even get it to flash red and yellow or something. So definitely check us out there. Check us out on Twitter and social media. We will, of course, be featuring social media in the comment section for any of the players who wish to have it mentioned. Of course, you can catch us again right here, twitch.tv /JDD Justice for our next set, and Judgestone this coming weekend.
Yes. So remember, we do have Judgestone every Sunday, and any other events. So definitely make sure to follow us on social media to be kept aware of anything that we are doing. We do have things going on pretty frequently. So definitely check us out. So again, as Owen said, a huge thank you to both players for participating in this exhibition match. Thank you to all of you at home who are watching, either live or through VOD. We do welcome your comments and any suggestions you might have for anything you'd like to see for the future. So check out the website, check us out on social media. We're always happy to talk to you guys about anything Hearthstone related, and we will see you soon.
Most certainly.